Okay, so now we're finally going to move on to the grade proper. We're going to start grading this and we're going to work our way right the way through to the end. Now, it's important to state that what we don't do is go through and grade every shot in fine detail and then hand it over in one pass. We work with multiple passes. This first video, this is going to be the first pass of this project. We're going to be going through and getting everything up to a fairly good standard, but it's going to be a bit rough in places, a few things to iron out. We're not finishing it in the space of 2 or 3 hours. That's not how it works. We do our first pass, we send it back to the client for feedback, we take any feedback into account then and there, because that's going to waste a lot less time than spending 8 hours on something, thinking that it's finished and then going back and having to change a load of things because the client has a different idea from us. So we're going to start on our first pass, and our client has chosen this look, 132 in my case. So what we can do is make a new album, and we're going to call this first pass, and we'll drag this into there, and then we'll give that a name, or give it a better name, and get our capitals right. There we go. So now we're in a good place to start working. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our versions and we'll get Clean Blue V Warm and we'll load that up. And now we're back to the correct version of the first clip we performed look development on. So the client's very happy with this. They think the face might be a little bit bright and the shirt might be a little bit blown out, so we can try and get that sorted just now. So let's sort out the face first. There we go. And now we'll fix. And to do that, I went onto the node with my face vignette and brought the offset down a bit. Then we'll go into our next primary node, and here we're going to bring, let's go back to Luma, we're going to bring the very top bits down. So these dusty bits here, they're bits of specular highlight, and they're primarily places in the practical light reflections up here, bits on his face, but a lot of it are the very bright highlights on his white shirt. And we're just going to bring those down a little bit because it's looking a little bit hot and blown out. There we go. And that now brings them down a bit so they're a bit more sensible. Also, it means that the face is more of a focal point. We still had some very bright details here. And bringing those down brings our focus back to our contributor's face, which is the all-important focal point in this shot. So, cool. We have now got a finished still we can use for our reference. So what we'll do is we'll go back, and now what we can start to do is group our shots together. We're going to go over shot grouping just now, and this is a very important thing, a very useful thing for saving a lot of time. We can match shots, or we can match any shots together and put them in a group so that a grade that hits one of them hits all of them. Obviously, the most practical way of doing this is to match shots of the same angle and the same subject because they are more likely to take the same grade. So we just select, hold Control or Command, click multiple clips, in this case these three, then right click and choose add into a new group, and we give that group a name, and we'll say woman in white shirt mid. And then we'll go through and we'll do the same for the close-ups, and we're going to go through and we're going to do this for all of our shots, get them all together in the right groups, and that's going to save a lot of time later on. So let's just go through and check for any others from that angle. I think it's only 2. Add into a new group, woman in white shirt CU. And this guy's the board director. So he's quite an important one. Throughout we want him to be looking good. We don't want any issues on these shots because this guy is at the top of the totem pole. And add into a new group, board director mid. Then we'll go through and get his close-ups. I don't think there are many close-ups of him. Oh no. I stand corrected. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've put everything into the correct groups. You should go and do the same. Put this video on pause and go ahead and do that. Get all your ducks in a line and we're going to be able to move much more efficiently. So what we can do, we've got this here. We can reset the grade. Now that we've put this clip in a group, when we click it we can see a green chain icon. Every other clip with the green chain icon is in the same group as this clip. So if I click on another one, you can see the mid shot of this woman here with the long hair. It's got a green chain on all the relevant clips. Now, we have several dots up here now, whereas we had two before. We start with clip, and clip only affects the individual clip we have highlighted. If I do something here, and go to the next version of this shot, nothing has happened. Yeah, clip only affects the clip we're currently on. We have one at the start, which is group pre-clip, and the third one along, which is group post-clip. Now, group pre-clip and group post-clip both happen to all clips in the group at the same time. I am now in group pre-clip, and if I make an adjustment in here and go to the next clip in the group, that adjustment, that grade, has carried across. This makes a very efficient method of working. So now, because we know that the light is very controlled and doesn't change much or if at all throughout this shoot, we can actually grade a series of shots very efficiently using our group. So, one more important thing. Group pre-clip happens before clip, and group post-clip happens after clip. So we have three steps. Group pre-clip happens first, clip then happens to the individual clip, and then group post-clip happens to everything in the group, but after any operations we put in clip. And there's one more thing, two things in the end, to keep track of. We can't track or animate any windows in the two group panels, only in clip. That's because Resolve isn't going to carry the animation between two clips in the same group. So if we want to track or animate or rotoscope, we have to do that in the clip window. We have to do that here, and it's only going to hit one clip at once. So we really have to think about whether or not manual tracking or animation or roto is really worth our time. In a lot of cases there are simpler solutions to the same problem. It looks like you might have to roto and do a load of keying and everything first. Very often there's a simpler way to get there, usually using primary tools and a few curves. You don't always have to go to the really time-consuming high-end stuff, and there's a real skill in making that judgment and deciding what you need to use and when. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy our confirmed look into our group pre-clip on the board director's mid-shots. We're then going to go to our face vignette, because this can't track, in the group settings, and we're going to delete it. This vignette is fine because it doesn't move. The key will carry over, and that's fine. So now we can be reasonably happy that we've got our signed look, and it's now applied to a number of these clips in our timeline. Okay, so I'm happy with this now. For the purposes of a first pass, this is fine. I would go back and I would reinstate the face vignette in each clip, tracked and everything, during the second pass. We're going to come back to that. We're not finishing it immediately, we're getting it up to a good place, pretty much. So now we're going to go through and we're going to start working on the other clips to match them up. So let's go and work on the close-up of our board director here. So okay, we've got a bit of a green push on this one. We do want to try and get the face in the right area. We want to try and match the contrast between the two faces here. That looks alright. Okay, so we're very, very green here, so we need to go and fix this. Let's bring our parade back up so we know what we're doing. So I can see a strong green push here. We need to fix that. Okay, those shadows are a little bit harsh. And that highlight in the back there is blown out a little bit, so we'll just... There we go. And maybe... bring that down as well. Right, for our basic primary, those two nodes will do. We've got our contrast sorted and we've started to address our colour. We've got a very greenish looking tint in the shadows in the back here. We're going to have to deal with that. And you can see this area here corresponds to this low reading and it's higher in green. So we can give lift a bit of a nudge towards magenta, but I suspect that that's going to tint the rest of the image. So I'll bring back the correction I have made in gamma, and that's now looking much more neutral. Nice. So now, next thing I want to do is sort out this weird cyan colour, make it blue, and sort out the blue on our shirt. So onto the secondary curves. Let's sort out the cyany green first. Now, this is tilting towards green if we take a look on the vector scope. We've got green coming down here between cyan and blue. Nothing's really pointing directly at blue. I don't want things to go magenta, so I'm going to keep that there. And now that's brought a lot of this green over. So now the next thing I want to do, and on this same node, this node we're going to deal with the green and the blue. And I'm going to get hold of the blue, and I'm going to crank up the saturation. Okay, I don't see any noise issues. Let's just bring up our... Now you can begin to see the similarity. Now you can begin to see the similarity between our original and this shot. So now we just need to sort out the skin and maybe a little bit of a tweak to our contrast, but we are getting there, clearly. So now we'll make a new node, and this time we're going to deal with the skin. Right, so now we're going to sort out the skin. In this case, we can quite easily key out the skin. Okay, so we've got some unwanted bits there, so what we can then do is combine that with a shape. And we'll just track that on. Aha, of course we can't combine that with a shape and track because we're in group, obviously. Okay, in that case we'll change tack. We won't use the HSL keyer. We'll use another curve. We can go through trying to do that, but it would be quite time consuming, and it's always better. So what we can do... Okay. Now looking at him, he might be a little bit yellow compared to our original, so what we'll do is we'll make a hue versus hue around the yellow. And we'll tilt that up ever so slightly. We'll rotate that hue and just make sure that we do get a nice proper match between the two. Right, in terms of saturation and hue, I'd say that's good. The contrast isn't quite there, but again, this is first pass. We'll go through second pass and we'll put the face vignettes back in on the clip. So now we have these three. In fact, he's probably a little bit too saturated now that I look at it, so let's just take that down a bit. Right, cool. That's a pretty good match. We can go back and we can refine that further in our second pass, so let's move on. We're going to prioritize everything in a group first, then we're going to come back to these one-offs. I didn't put a green flag down on a master shot this time, but because I did the look development on this, I pretty much made the decision that this was my master shot, so now everything is being matched to this look. So we go ahead and match along. What I will do is I will take a still. Now, one important thing when you're working with groups and taking stills, the still will store the grade from whatever window up here in the node tree was active at the time the still was taken. If I take a still from here when clip is active and all my grading is in group, it's not going to do anything. I can try and copy that across and nothing will happen. If I take a still from when group pre-clip is active, I then get the grade in there and I can tell if it was taken in pre or post because it will then say pre or it will say post afterwards next to the still to show me where it came from. So in this case I want to take a still from group pre-clip and we can check if things will copy across. So let's go on to this clip and we'll take care of all of our contributors first and then we'll deal with our B-roll afterwards. Okay, this one's probably going to take a bit more work. Nothing will copy across, so let's get started. Let's go from scratch. Got a very big problem with yellow light, which is probably down to a combination of sunlight and tungsten and only having color balanced for one. In this case it's fairly simple to correct. Okay, we want to keep an eye on her skin there. This isn't FS7, its treatment of skin tones isn't ideal. You very often get a weird porcelain kind of effect and things go very pink. Let's just take a look. Okay, this one's going to need quite a lot of work, but we are up to that, so we'll go ahead and get that done. Okay, this is now getting closer. Now I've been grading in clip by mistake, so what I'll do is I'll grab a still, I'll reset this grade, I'll go back into group pre-clip, and then I'll just paste the grade into there. Very common mistake, very easy to fix, so don't worry too much about it. Okay, so that's our basic primary. Now we can move on. We'll just cluster these up a bit. So there we go. We've got our kind of primary cluster up there, and now we're going to move into secondary work. So her skin is actually looking okay there. It's these blue bits that concern me. We want to try and get the blue to match up. So let's see how far a curve will take us. We don't want to rush straight into a time-consuming HSL or bit of rotoscoping if we can avoid it. Let's bring the vector scope up so we know what we're doing. There we go. Now if I really go for this, I'm going to start to introduce a bit of noise, because we're getting quite a lot of yellowy green. What I don't want is for this to spill on over into some areas of the skin tone. And this is quite an aggressive curve, so we will see if we get away with this. Okay, that's starting to make strange things happen. So that's about as far as the curve can take us. That's a nice start, but it's still not quite there. Let's see if we get the same out of the saturation curve. Let's make sure we bring up a nice clean blue. Okay, we're going to need to do a bit more work on there. We need to try and deal with these yellowy bits. So let's just see. Okay, we do have some camera movement, so we can't just make a garbage matte and think that'll help. So let's just see what we can do. This is the kind of shot that does take a while. If we start to lose a lot of time to this, we'll put a yellow flag on it and we'll move on. So we can actually get a pretty good key on that. I'm quite happy with that. Maybe slim it down a bit so we're not going to make any odd stuff happen. And we'll clean our white out and we'll blur it right out. Okay, let's see how far we get with the garbage matte. We do have camera movement throughout. And we'll have to come back in and we'll have to check. It may be that we do a lot of our work on a clip-by-clip basis in this one instead of relying on the group, but we'll see. So now what we can do... There we go, and now we can start to fix this wall here, make it nice and blue and clean. And we can bring that back under control. What we want to avoid is this kind of middle band here, where some hues which are already blue are being picked up in our HSL key. So what we can then do is just bring it down slightly. And we want to try and avoid a visible join in the two hues here, and we can avoid that by blurring the living hell out of it. Cool. So now we've fixed that blue wall. Now I'm going to want to spot check a few more of these and make sure okay, there is some spill onto that thumb. It's very, very short. It's not there for very long. We could justifiably leave that, but let's try and minimize the impact we're having on skin tones. There we go, that's much better. Let's just go through and check if we have any other instances of this shot. One here. No, we need to check this again. Okay, we have a hard edge up there, which is not acceptable. You can kind of see it happen, so what we will do is just soften that out. And there is a bit of a change there, but especially once we vignette the face and bring that out, I don't think there's going to be a problem. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. I think that's in first pass condition. When we start to garbage matte in the group settings, we go through and we check every shot as we're working. We don't want to think, oh, this is absolutely fine, get so far, and then realise, oh, hang on a second, this is awful, we need to fix everything. So, of course, there's no secondary there. Right, now next one, we'll just put that in its own little cluster up there, knowing that's to deal with the blues. And now the next one, we can start to take a look at the skin. I actually think the skin is looking pretty good already. I think with a face vignette, that's going to be okay. I don't feel the need to really mess around with her skin tone too much. Looking at distractions in this shot, one region kind of glares out at me, and that's down here in the bottom left. We have a very saturated shadow here, and that's exposed a lot of noise in this image. So I'm just going to put a curve in here. And I'm just going to try and bring that down a little bit so it's not too fierce. I don't want it to look charcoal and drab, but I don't want it to look bizarre either. There we go. So there to there, it just draws less of the eye. Now let's take a look at our parade. Okay, we've got a few things clipping, so what we can do is go back into our primary RGB curve, and we will just bring that very top down, and we will add a Lumv set. And we'll just clean those out a little bit because they're glowing a kind of weird high-vis yellow. Now when we're doing this, we want to be careful that we're not actually hitting the face and making her look porcelain. Just pull a bit of the colour out of those hot spots up there, and that's okay. Right, let's just make sure that we haven't interfered with the skin. Cool. Right, I am happy to leave that there. I'm happy to say that that's in first pass condition. We're going to go back, add a face vignette. We could maybe add some more vignettes later on. We'll see what the client thinks, but for now, that shot is okay. We'll move on to the next one. We don't want to spend hours and hours and hours on a single shot. That's a very inefficient way to work. We had a few problems there. We solved them. Fine. Now onto this one. What we will do is we will take a still. Make sure we have, in case we happen to need the grade to copy onto anything else later on, we'll take that just now. And now we will start to grade this one. Now we're probably not going to want to stretch everything out here because her face will glow and look all odd. We probably want to bring it up about that far. Right, so this is looking yellow-green to me. We can also see that on the parade. This might pose a challenge. Whilst the skin looks great here, everything else looks wrong, so we're probably going to have to do some secondary work to fix this. Okay, I've also missed placing this in a group, so I will fix that just now. And I will just copy and paste this grade into group pre-clip. As I said, very easy mistake to make. Yeah. So now we need to go through and sort our colour out. We've got a weird greeny yellow tint in everything. Okay, you know what, let's start this one again. Every now and again, things don't work out quite as you'd like. We just hit this reset button here, then we can start again, so we'll give that another go. Let's try dealing with the shadows first. Okay, if I try and balance that out, that's not going to work. That's going to hit the skin and things will go wrong. Let's go back to... Okay, we've got a lot of work to do on this one. This is one of the more challenging shots. Okay, we're probably going to have to rely on secondaries to get the rest of this done, so let's see what we can do. Let's cluster these up. That's our primary. Now we'll move on to secondary, and we'll try and get the blue stuff sorted here. Got a bit of moire pattern going down there, which is not ideal. We might have to deal with that later. Right, let's see how well we do. Oh dear, okay. Okay, we can probably key out this wall quite easily. All we need to do is combine that with the garbage mat. This is a pretty static shot, so a shape will be quite simple. And now, there we go, we can make that conform. Cool. Okay, it may be better not to grade these shots in a group, maybe to grade them individually, as we're probably going to need to track things here, but we'll see how far we can get. We've got bits of obvious chatter on these arrows, we need to fix that. Okay, I think we're going to, we get a point where she leans in and we start to get a bit of chatter here. So let's just see if we can do that without having to animate a shape. I doubt it. What we'll also do is we'll soften it up a fair amount. Now we start to get a halo around here. Okay, that's fine. That means that this shape isn't going to benefit from being in a group, or this shot isn't going to benefit from being in a group. And we have to grade it individually. That's okay. We'll just copy and paste this back into the clip part. And we know that we've got a bit of manual, well, a bit of very light rotoscoping to take care of here. That's fine. We'll cover that. We're going to leave that there. That's a pretty good place for it to be in first pass. We might actually just do a bit of work on the suit there to make it blue, actually. But we'll go ahead and we'll do that animation in the second pass. Again, we're getting things into roughly the right place now. When we show this to the client, we'll say, look, this is what we're going for. There's some animation to finish here, but in these frames you can see that's the look. We're going to make it clear that we're not delivering it to them with a great big halo visible. So then the next thing to do is to see if we can work on the suit. We're going a little bit HSL heavy here. What we don't want is for, obviously it's quite blue there, and it's completely black there, so we need to try and fix that. This might take a while. Okay, this is going to be loose. We're not going to push this too far, seeing how loose our secondary is. And we're going to keep a close eye on this hand down here, although it's barely in. Okay, and let's just compare that. In fact, that might be a little bit over the top, so we're just going to bring our correction back. That's actually a pretty good match there. It doesn't need to be extreme. We're just getting that kind of blue feel, and now we've got a nice bluey warm here. So I'm happy for that to be our first pass. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a flag on here, and it's going to let me know that I'm going to need to manually keyframe or animate a property in this to sell the look. And In my parlances, I use the cyan flag to signify that. Cyan, to me, means requires manual rotoscoping or keyframing or animation of some kind. So now, I'm going to go ahead to the next version of this shot. Where has it gone? There she is. And I'm just going to copy it across and put a cyan flag on that, so I know that I then need to fix that and do some manual animation to fix the look there. Now there's a distinction I'm drawing between something which I know I'm going to put a face vignette on afterwards as a matter of kind of common practice, and something that definitely needs rotoscoping in order to succeed, and that's what the cyan flag means. It doesn't mean I'm going to track just any old thing like I would expect to in a lot of cases. It means that I know there's specific rotoscoping or animation required in order to fix a key issue. So now we can go on and we can just double check. Now this shot takes other corrections very well. What we can do is we can copy a grade in here, and we can then start to make adjustments to make that work. The shadows are very strong and yellow here, more so than in our board director's shot. So whilst this gets us a good measure of the way there, I'll just take that off for the time being. That gets us a good measure of the way there. There's still a fair amount of work to do, so we're going to go back. We'll just cluster these up as well. We'll go back into our primaries. Our shadows here are very, very yellow, and we can see just how yellow this bloke is in the background. What we might be tempted to do here is use the log wheels. If we hit with just the primaries, it's going to tint the rest of the image, and we don't want that. The log wheels are accurate enough for us to deal with this. We know it's only a certain region of the shadows which are very yellow. So what we'll do is I'm eyeballing it and saying anything below a quarter of maximum brightness looks like the issue to me. So I'm going to put my lower range down. So I'm going to put my lower range down and then see how close I can get. And that's getting closer. That's too high, so it's probably around 0.28. And there's just a bit of an awkward dance to do here. Okay, and what I might also be tempted to do on the same node is pull a little bit of colour out of the shadows as well. You might notice I drag things up beforehand, before I drag them down, and that just helps me see if I've made a correct a qualification using this curve that's accurate enough. It's easier for me to see brighter colours than it is to see things lose their colour. So I do this, and then, okay, I know I've got the right region I'm working with. Okay, now let's make the correction. That's why I do that, if you're wondering. Okay. That's getting pretty close. There's still a little bit of blue here. Our clear focus is our contributor here. I just want to make sure this guy isn't completely out of whack, but you can see the problem is here he's kind of all right, and then he walks right into a practical spot there, which is tungsten, and he goes very, very yellow. So tell you what I might do in that case. I might make an outside node from our skin key, Alt and O, and now I might just bring the yellows outside of the skin key down ever so slightly. What I don't want to do is lose too much of the wood, but I kind of just want to bring that tungsten spill back under control. Let's just double check. Okay, that's fine, that's a good match. We can also see our time of day has changed. Our background there isn't quite as bright, but that's okay. I'm not going to blow that out deliberately because our focus here is our contributor, and as long as she's a good enough match, That's fine. One thing I should go over, you might be seeing things like this. Resolve previews the grade of the still if you mouse over it. So this would be essentially the grade being applied twice in a row, which obviously would be pretty extreme. That's why we're seeing this weird kind of colour. It's not to say that that's what I've done at any point, but if I mouse over something else, let's say if I go back to LD and I mouse over this, it will show you what would happen if we were just to kind of layer the grade in the still on top of what we already have. So that's why we're seeing that. Maybe she needs a face vignette and maybe a little bit more colour in the skin. So I might just go back to the skin key, make sure I'm back in primary wheels again, and just crank that up slightly. And I might be tempted just to shift some of the yellow hues closer to red. She's looking a little bit orange and yellow to me. There we go. Maybe that's still a little bit on the pink side. Cool. And then with the face vignette, I can bring that in closer. Last thing to do, go back to the curve. I might just bring the highlights on her shirt back under control. There we go. We don't want the shirt to steal focus from her. Maybe I will bring some of those shadows down, and I will bring our mids up slightly. Just increase the contrast a bit, and there we go. Right, that's a good place for first pass, and we'll move on to the next shot. So like I said, we're doing quite a lot of detailed work, but we're not getting everything absolutely perfect. We're not, making loads and loads of rotoscoped masks and everything. All the really detailed stuff comes back in second pass. Once we get this sorted, we'll send it off to our client, and then they'll feedback, and we can start to incorporate that into our working process now, instead of, like I said, basically finishing a project and then going back and changing everything, which just wastes so much time. So we're making nice progress, but we've got plenty of time left to go. This will take a good few hours yet, so we're just going to keep on going. Now feel free to progress at your own rate if you want, or watch this all through and work along. It's entirely your choice. This is a demonstration of how I would approach a professional contract. So now we're going to see if we can make use of everything. That's a nice start, but the hair is a little bit fearsome here. Cool. In that case, what I'm going to want to do... These are the blues, aren't they? Is that the blue? Is that the skin? No, that's skin. Okay. I'm going to want to just make a bit of a secondary to bring down this colourful highlight on the hair, which looks a little bit off, and maybe these orange regions in the background as well, and that's going to be HSL most likely. And we can blur that right down. That looks a bit messy. It's going to be a slight adjustment inside, so it's okay. And we're not going to bring it right down. We're just going to tone that down a little bit so that it fits in with everything else, and about 45 should be okay. And that's just taken that little bit of an odd glow off. That's in a pretty good place now. We maybe have some halos of green around there, so let's go back and check our curves. Cool. First pass, I'm pretty happy with that. And we shall move on. Let's just check. Cool. little bit more of a match to go between those two. We'll pick that up in the second pass. We'll keep moving. Like I said, and like I keep on saying, and like I will continue to keep on saying, we're not finishing the grade in this pass. We're getting it into a good position. We're basically showing the client what we're doing and getting it into a good position that we can display. Oh, it's me cracking my fingers. We're then just getting it into a good place and then showing the clients they can give us feedback. So we're going to keep going. Now we have a choice to make with this contributor. Do we want to try and force his grey jacket to be blue? We could try. We're on quite a tight schedule with this one. Let's say we've got a single working day to turn this all around to a high-end final pass. That's about 8 hours in a working day, and the client's also going to need it to be uploaded to them as well, so we have to factor that in. On balance, with the time we have, I wouldn't throw loads of time away on this jacket, because keying neutral and darker colours especially is very difficult, because they're very often a broad range of hues with a very low saturation value. So we'll just try, let's just paste this on, and then we'll try quickly to key out this jacket. So now you see when I try and key out this grey jacket, it's almost every hue at the same time, but with a very low saturation value. This makes colours like this quite difficult to key out accurately. So if I'm going to make his jacket blue, it's probably going to be a rotoscoping job, and I don't want to throw time away doing that, to be frank. So I'm okay with his jacket being grey. I think it's clear and obvious that his jacket is grey and not just the wrong colour in the grade. We also don't want the vignette on the left-hand side. One danger when you copy-paste grades along is that you keep a bit like inaccurate vignettes along. You need to keep an eye out for that. We don't want the face vignette. We don't want that vignette on the left-hand side. Okay, so this is looking all right. It's a bit dark. We can go to our last node and we can just sort that out. We can bring our mids up. I might want to do the same thing we did. Oops, wrong area. I might want to do the same thing I did before. Hold Alt and O and make an outside node. And just bring the yellow down a little bit. Try and maintain some neutrality in these columns and try and make it so that this guy's not so crazy in the background. So that's getting there, and then what we can try and do is just cool down the shadows a touch. As we do that, our grey jacket's taking on a slightly blue tint. That's okay, that makes it fit in better, but we're not going to make a secondary for the jacket. And fix that. Okay, and what I might do, he's looking a little bit yellow. I might just shift some of the yellow hues up ever so slightly. It's very slightly. Like maybe by a value of 1. There we go. Just bring out the colour in there. Okay, primary cleanup, and then what we'll do is we'll reinstate a new vignette on the right hand side. Now he's pretty vertical. He's not as diagonal as the board director was, so we won't make the shape we're doing here as diagonal. There we go. It's not quite as colourful. Maybe we could go and we could bring the blues up a smidge. But I want to be careful that this door doesn't look daft. Okay, that's pretty good. Could use a bit more work, but it's good enough for first pass. So we'll save and we'll move on. So around this point in a project you might feel like taking a break. I would recommend that. We'll save. As a general rule of thumb, every 2 hours you work in the grade you should take a 10 or a 15-minute break in natural sunlight if possible. Our eyes have a kind of natural white balance function, then we slowly come to see the image we're looking at as neutral even when it's not. Because of this, it can cause problems if you're grading in long haul shifts because you kind of lose your point of reference. So it's very important to go out and basically reset your eyes, come back to it with eyes more acclimatized to the way the world actually looks, and then you might be surprised if you've worked for a very long shift and you go out for a break in sunlight and you come back, you might be surprised at just how out of whack some of your work can be. It happened to me a lot when I was first starting out, because obviously you think, no, I don't need to take a break, because I don't need to, I'm fine. But you do need to take a break in natural sunlight to reset your eyes' white balance so that you maintain a proper natural perspective on the work that you're doing. So at this point I would say, it's not quite been 2 hours yet, but what the hell, go out, take a 10-minute break in natural sunlight if at all possible. If it's nighttime or if it's gone dark where you are, then take a break anyway. Try and look at something which is quite natural. Try and look at something illuminated that's not illuminated by strong orange tungsten light if at all possible. If it's not, just take a break and relax for 10 minutes and come back. Right, I'm going to assume that you took a break just then, so we will move on. Okay, back to it. We've got this close-up to deal with, and some of our pre-existing grades get us pretty close. I'd say we can probably start with this one. And that is pretty good. We don't always just make a straight copy across. In this case that appears to be okay. We're getting some clipping. We might just bring that down a little bit on our primary node at the start. That's a pretty good match. That might need to be brought down a little bit now that we're looking at it. Might just need to bring the mids down ever so slightly. Cool. That's pretty good, and of course we've done these to first pass, so we'll go to the next contributor. Ah, this guy's not in the right clip. Right, in the right group, actually. So we'll add him. He should be short-haired man 1 mid. There we go. If we happen to miss any of these when making our groups, it's quite easy to fix that. Okay, so we have our last batch of contributors back here. This one's probably going to need a bit more work. This wall was a little bit awkward last time. Okay, none of our previous looks are really appropriate there, so we'll go at this one from scratch. So let's get started. Right, so let's get started. Okay, let's get our primary balance done. That's looking pretty good. Let's just balance up our shadows here. And our highlights. Got a little bit of a clipping highlight there. We'll just bring that back down, back under control. We might just bring our saturation up further. Cool, that's getting in a pretty nice place already. I think we can do something quite good here just with a few curves. So let's go on to Hue v Hue. And we'll sort out our green and cyan. Let's bring our vector scope up again. We can see what we're doing. Okay, we want to be careful of that cheese plant in the background there. It's got a bit of a funny colour. And we're getting some odd yellowy green effects over there. Okay, we have some pre-existing strong green. Okay, that means that the yellows. That's blue, okay. Right, we're unlikely to fix all of that with a single curve adjustment then. But we can get that pretty close. We've got a nice set of blues here. We'll see if we think the plant is a problem when we do our UV set. That's quite nice. That's quite a nice clean look. Now the blue wall there isn't quite as blue as it was before. It's down to us as to whether or not we think that's a big problem. I quite like having details like that match, and this is quite simple. I would do that in second pass because it requires a bit of a manual track. So what we'll do is we'll put a cyan flag on there, and I'll just track a garbage mat to that wall and make it a bit bluer later on. That's fine. Some green details in the background there, so let's see if we can try and fix those. Try and take care of this kind of green noise. Then what we might just do is try and just make those blue. Now that's going to hit the plant quite badly, but we can constrain that with a garbage mat. Let's just make sure we haven't introduced any other serious issues, but that's now... Okay, that's made some stuff here, so let's just... There we go. What we'll do is we'll blur that right out to hide the joins. Okay. Down here, that's done quite a nice job of hiding it. Up in the wall, if we look closely, it's made kind of a weird patchy effect. So maybe if we just tone that down a smidge. That's okay. That's hit the wall there, but it's also hit the plant. I'm just going to put a static garbage mat over that and keep it to our kind of right-hand side. I don't want it to interfere with other things because I only really had that side in mind when I did that. Come on. And that's fine. Right, just one last thing to take care of. This band on the cube back there is very strong and saturated and is a little bit distracting, so we'll just make a secondary around that. It's quite a distinct colour. It should be quite easy to key out through a combination of choosing the darker hues and the higher saturations. And we'll just kill the saturation there a little bit so it doesn't quite scream out the way it did. I am pretty happy with that. Maybe later on I might have a go at making the cheese plant a bit greener,